I hope that everybody had a happy Passover and happy Easter. Welcome to the implementation meeting. It's April 8th. So, are we getting ready? Are we getting settled? Want to thank, come on, Bill. Time, Bill. It's because we have so much on our agenda to get through today.
Bill just jinxed it.
Yeah. First of all, want to thank everybody on the implementation committee for the accommodation of allowing us to delay it a week in light of the 8 days we were given to move from the 1130 K Street over to the Ziggurat building in West Sac, and I'm not sure we're all quite settled yet, so I apologize for those who've been writing their names on their little who they are sheets. I appreciate your consideration in knowing that we're kind of running around doing those things. And I apologize for those that are not here. I organized this meeting in conflict with something going on at CDE, so that's why we have new people. So I'm actually going to go have everybody do a brief introduction, starting with Lisa, so that we can highlight who we are for those who are watching on film.
Lisa Constancio. I'm with one of the field consultants with the Department of Education. No Padre jokes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jeff Becker. I'm here representing CSESA this morning.
Mary Morris with the American Institute of Architects.
Bill Savage, Coalition for Adequate School Housing, West Contra Costa Unified School District.
Juan Morales, representing the Office of Public School Construction.
Sean?
Sean Atlow, Los Angeles Unified School District.
Debbie Pearson for Small School Districts.
Dennis Dunstan for the Council of Educational Facility Planners International.
Thank you, everyone. One of the things we did forget to do was to put in kind of what our pending item list is, so you get to write it in this morning as I tell you. Very much apologize in the move, and that the fact that we have changed board attorneys, all the legal questions we've asked in regards to CTE have still not been prepared, but they should. Organized, chaotic family. So plan on CTE coming back in May. There's the potential for seismic safety coming back in May. That's being worked on now. I know it's a priority for Senator Hancock and Scott Harvey at DGS, so there may be discussions of changes in regs for seismic safety. And then also, I'm giving you a heads up, depending on what happens at the April State Allocation Board meeting with apportionments, there may be regulation changes and issues we come back to the Implementation Committee in May to discuss. So there may be a vague apportionment reg changes caveat put in, because we have to put out, per the Bagley-Keene, the agenda before the State Allocation Board meeting. So there's no guarantee, but I have a pretty good inclination that we're going to be directed to look at certain changes with certain things and regulations and timelines. So we might actually be prepared to have 2 May meetings if the board directs us to do certain things in a short amount of time to expedite getting money out in a different than the FIFO. So there's no guarantee, but I'd rather have us prepared for something that may come out that's a little different than normal, and I figure it's only good to let you know. And I know we've got a request from one of our other implementation members, Lee Coop, to have another discussion on something, but I need to weigh that out of whether that is May or June. Anything else, the pending items? Yes, Jeff.
Lisa, I just wanted to ask about the schedule for IMP. I know on the website I think it still only goes through June and it doesn't show a May meeting at all.
Oh well, May meeting will be the first Thursday in May. So, and we are going to continue regularly scheduled first of the month meetings, until we run out of items. If anybody foresees us running out of items. So, just plan on that. Is there anything else, others, suggestions, ideas that they would like to see discussed at IMP or taken into consideration for discussion? All righty. Mr. LePasque.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you mind having your staff introduce?
Not at
themselves?
all. I have Tim Hegedus here with me, who works at OPSC. We have Teresa Townsend and Lydia Barone from DSA, who've assisted us greatly with this process, and we appreciate it very much. With that, we have some ideas here that we'd like to present to everybody, hopefully to open up this program a little bit, as we've discussed a lot in the recent past. For those of you that aren't aware, we had $100 million set aside out of Prop 1D for high-performing projects that meet high-performance standards. There's 5 categories, which are sustainable sites, energy, water, materials, and indoor environmental quality. Basically, the way you get these grants is by submitting a design to DSA. That results in a scorecard from DSA that describes how many high-performance rating criteria points that the design achieves, and it translates into a percentage increase to the base grant amount for the new construction or modernization project that comes to OPSC. At the February SAB meeting, we were asked to convene a work group to kind of take a look at the reasons why the program hasn't been more popular with modernization projects and more popular in general. We still have about 75 to 78 or so million left out of the 100 million, and it's been quite a while since that money's been available. And so we met with a lot of people. We had architects, school districts, the U.S. Green Building Council that's responsible for administering the LEED certified program. Collaborative for High Performance Schools, or CHIPS, as everybody refers to them as. Cash, legislative staff, CDE, and DSA, and us all got together a couple of times last month and sort of worked through the ideas that everybody had for increasing participation in this program and maybe focusing on some of the areas that were lacking or more difficult to attain, and trying to kind of reward those with more points. And we'll get into exactly what we did, but the idea behind it was to incentivize people to participate more and to hopefully get these funds moving a little bit quicker, since we're really quickly running out of our bond funds. I think at last check we have right around $1.5 billion left for modernization, and we're pretty much exhausted for new construction at this moment. So the focus is definitely on modernization. So based on those meetings, the things that we decided to present today resulted in 21 additional points that are available in the criteria. We want to stress that 7 of those points are based on 5 prerequisites that every single project must meet. Those are basically now, school districts don't have to do anything else in order to qualify for these additional 7 points that are attached to prerequisites. So essentially, any project that came in before is going to get 7 more points immediately upon receipt. There's nothing they have to do differently. The reason why we address these prerequisites is because all of them, the prerequisites in our criteria, are above and beyond what's required in code. And so we figured that it was a natural choice, logical choice to attach points to those, since they are above code. People are already achieving higher than they need to as a prerequisite, so we decided to attach points to those. An example of how this would augment a project, just on the prerequisites alone, is if you look on the bottom of stamp page number 2, the second paragraph under staff comments, we took an example of a new school project that had a base grant amount of $30 million, that had 34 points, which is a pretty, I'd say, average number for the amount of points people can get. It would result in a $705,000 HPI grant currently. If we were to add those 7 points in alone, not considering the other 14 points that are available on top of those, but just the 7 points for prerequisites, it would increase that grant to 41 points or 1.2 million. So you can see there's a great increase just by the prerequisites alone. Moving over to the next page, stamp page 3, we've detailed the points that we've added by category. Just quickly going through them. There's 2 more points available in the water category. The idea behind these is that reduction of potable water usage is on the rise right now. It's something that's popular and something that the state's having. We have our water resources are diminished right now, so it's something that's more difficult to attain. We attached a point each for indoor and outdoor potable water reduction. The energy category is really where we focused most of our energy. There's actually a total of 14 points more available in energy now. 2 of those are for the prerequisite for meeting minimum energy performance, and then we added a section for plug loads monitored by emergency energy management systems. It kind of goes along with commissioning, which is the last bullet in that paragraph, and it's just making sure that the things that you put in, the components you put into your buildings are working properly, and that they're commissioned or kind of tuned to work properly. And having an EMS also helps greatly with those to make sure you're getting the most out of your new systems. There's also a prerequisite in this category for fundamental building systems testing and training. That's above and beyond code already. And then we have a bunch of points attached to renewable energy. DSA can speak more to this, I think, than I can, but renewable energy is one of those things that we're really pushing, and we're hoping that people choose to go that route and take advantage of the points that are now available. It used to go up to 35%, and now it goes up to 90%, or 95%, which is considered grid neutral. So there's a lot of points in that category, and we really focus in on energy quite a bit. In the materials category, we have 2 prerequisites, one for storage and collection of recyclables and the other one for construction waste management. We attached a point to each one of those. And then down in indoor environmental quality, we attached 2 points for the prerequisite for acoustical performance because it's so expensive and it's something that's difficult to quantify. So we thought it would be natural to maybe attach 2 points instead of 1 to that one. And we also added an incentive for replacement of existing lamps with low mercury lamps. We really were wanting to know how this would affect actual projects. We knew that these projects wouldn't be able to get every single point available, the new points, but we took a look at one project that's currently in DSA. It's a pretty high performing project already. It's 45 points, and we conservatively took a look at how it would increase with these changes that we're proposing with the 21 new points. And it actually resulted in 12 additional points, 7 of the prerequisites, and then 5 other points throughout the various categories. This resulted in an increase of about 70% to the existing grant. We don't know how many grants this project is going to request yet, but an average modernization project is about a $2 million state grant, and so we used that number, $2 million, and it increased actually from $108,000 to just over $183,000. And it could even be higher than that if they were to pursue renewable energy or some of the other things that we have points for now. So it could increase, it could even double, it could even more than double if they were to take advantage of all the new points that are available. So I guess in a nutshell, that's our proposal today. We had a number of other ones, and I'd like to kind of briefly cover those, namely 3 of them. We have a proposal that has been submitted jointly from the Coalition for Adequate School Housing and CHIPS, and it's a 2-tiered approach. For modernization projects, the first tier would include a $250,000 flat grant for any project that meets one of 3 requirements, and the 3 requirements would be either being CHIPS or LEED certified. That's the first 2, and the third one is meeting the minimum point threshold for modernization projects to qualify for grants, which is set at 20 points. That hasn't changed. So if they meet any of those three criteria, they'd get a $250,000 flat grant in this proposal. In addition to that, and actually for new construction projects, that's for modernization projects. For new construction projects, meeting those criteria would be $150,000, except for that for new construction projects, instead of 20 points, it's 27. So they meet any of those three, and in either mod or new construction, they get the 250 for mod, 150 for new construction, and on top of that, they're proposing to double the funding associated with the points that we currently have. So they're not really suggesting any sort of changes to our current criteria, the way it's been spelled out for a few years now. They just want us to double the funding associated with however many points they get. We also had input from San Bernardino School District, and it was kind of there was kind of three suggestions included in that, and what they were they were suggesting that we establish an eligibility criteria specific to this program. I'm not really sure how that would work. We got this proposal yesterday, or the day before yesterday, so I'm not exactly sure what they have in mind. It's something we can certainly discuss if that's what everybody wants to do. Their other ideas were aligning the grants more with actual costs, and then possibly having a preliminary or a set-aside type of apportionment, the way ORG or the Career Tech program works. And I think this has to do with them being able to count on those funds being there after their design phase. So those are certainly interesting points they make. The last suggestion that we got came in a letter form from Margie Brown, who's not here today. I don't see her today. She didn't really have too many suggestions. She just was kind of buttressing the point that Cash and Chips made about the $250,000. She compared some grants that she was able to get in her school districts from the California Integrated Waste Management Board that happened to be $250,000, and how they helped her to build high-performing schools. And she had a lot of interesting, good thoughts on how it would help school districts to plan and design their projects with a known quantity, kind of knowing on the back end what they're going to get and enabling them to design up to those standards. So I think that really covers the proposals that we want to discuss today. Does anybody have any questions? We want to open it up, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, Bill?
I just have a question first about the 7 prerequisites, which you say you're 7 additional points associated with prerequisites or previously required but didn't have point values. Are those the ones, so on the next page, on stamp page 3, the energy performance prerequisite, is that one of the 7?
Yeah, there's actually 5 categories. 3 of them got 1 point, 2 of them got 2 points.
And so, but they're all on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I can quickly cover them
The
again.
acoustical prerequisite is one
Is that-
0 to 2. Okay.
That's 2 points. There's 2 in the materials category.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
And then there's the construction waste management one.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and then the minimum energy performance is also 2 points.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Question to the board. Would you, as we move forward, would you actually like to have Chips come up and explain their proposal a little bit more, Cash, so we can get the all-encompassing before we go into the conversation? Is that something? Great. Bill, you're on the spot. Cash and Chips? All right.
I can just pull up another chair.
Sure.
Good morning. Ian Padilla with the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. My plan was, of course, to summarize the CHIPS cash proposal, but Mr. LePask did a real good job of kind of, discussing the tiering and so on. So I'll certainly be here for any questions. I know Mr. Orr has some comments to make as well, so I'm available.
Well, I think the thing I'd like to start off with is, first of all, I'm Bill Orr, the Executive Director with the Collaborative for High Performance Schools. And over the last couple of months, Cash and CHIPS and the High Performance Work Group that was convened by OPSC have been working together to come up with some options. And the fundamental piece of the Cash-CHIPS joint proposal is the notion of having a flat incentive, as Brian described. Part of the discussion that's been going on is what's the rationale for that? And so I wanted to cover that in just a second here. And I think that the important thing about it is that the current program is based on incentive, but also with the notion of paying some portion of incremental costs associated with various high-performance features, with the assumption that as you get more points under the regulations, you're going to incur additional costs. And the CHIPS cash proposal is fundamentally different. It's basically looking at what is it going to take in the current economic climate? What is it going to take, given all the competing demands that there are on schools as they're going through and developing projects, to really get them to sit up and take notice of high-performance features? Really, it's a focus on what's it going to take to create behavior change. And so, while, yes, there are costs embedded in developing a high-performance school, both in terms of additional design costs, additional time involved in doing that, and also additional time and expense in integrating the features into the building, it's really fundamentally a different program. And so, one of the things that I've been thinking about is I pretty much learned everything I needed to know by the time I got to kindergarten. And one of the things I really liked when I was a kid were fairy tales and fables. And so I'd sort of like to start off describing how we view the incentive program working by one of those fairy tales, which was Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And as you remember in the story, Goldilocks went off through the forest and she came across the house where three bears lived, the papa bear, the mama bear, and the baby bear. And she sampled their porridge and she slept in their beds. And basically what she found was that there was one that was too much, one that was too little, and one that was just right. And so using that as an analogy for basically how I envision this cash CHIPS proposal working is that we're trying to find that just right place. So the current program, I think we can all acknowledge, is sort of the too cold porridge. We haven't had the uptake on the grant program that we anticipated. We've only had a small, especially as we look at modernizations, we've had 0.5% of the modernization projects that have gone through the process so far go after it. So I think clearly the porridge has been too cold up until this point. The initial worry when we developed this program a couple of years ago that the porridge was going to be too hot and that the money would go flying out the door, and clearly that's not happened either. But I think what we're trying to say is, given where we are now, what is that just right porridge? And so that's what we've tried to build in terms of the rationale. And so one of the things we proposed is a $250,000 starter incentive for modernizations, $150,000 for new schools. And it was based in part on the experience that CHIPS and the Energy Commission had back when high-performance schools were first being created. And there were at least 3 schools around the state that obtained grants, 2 of them from the Energy Commission and 1 of them from the Integrated Waste Management Board. The letter that Brian Lepask mentioned was intended really to share the experience of Margie Brown, who was at that time the Director of Facilities for the Santa Ana Unified School District. And I think it's safe to say that based on their experience that it worked well. It provided that kind of behavior change incentive that we're looking for with this program now, that the school that was funded, the Heroes Elementary School in Santa Ana, would not be a high-performance school but for this incentive grant, and that it was structured in such a way that it basically kept them on track as a district and provided that incentive. The second school that was part of that was and the attachment that was with our joint proposal was slightly inaccurate. It was actually the Cesar E. Chavez Education Center, not middle school, although there was a middle school co-located on the property. And that was a grant from the Energy Commission, similar, $250,000. It was one of the very first high-performance schools. It was designed under the 2002 CHIPS criteria. And not only did it have the incentive effect of being a high-performance school, but it basically has had the additional leveraging effect where Oakland Unified School District has adopted a high-performance school resolution and are committed to building all of their schools as high-performance schools. Similarly, the third project was the Alder Creek Middle School up in Truckee, and it received a $250,000 grant, again from the Energy Commission, and has had a similar incentive approach and leveraging effect with the district up in Truckee. So I think those are three illustrations. Now, it was the grants were originally done through a competitive grant process that was implemented through the Energy Commission. I have contacted the Energy Commission, but like a lot of state agencies over recent years, there's been a lot of movement. And so actually documenting the actual rationale that they used in coming up with the $250,000 has been a bit of a challenge. We're still working on that. However, I think it's safe to say that it was based on a combination of the number of schools they were trying to get, the amount of money that they had available, and what it would take to incentivize this behavior change. And I think we're in that place today, and particularly regarding modernizations. A couple of the other features that I just wanted to highlight of the proposal in terms of the rationale, and this was alluded to both through Margie Brown's letter and then Brian's presentation, is the importance of certainty to really providing that incentive, and essentially knowing up front that you can count on, if you do this, you're going to get that. Through the process of developing a CHIP school or going through the HPI process, the number of points you get can fluctuate during the course of the project. You know, during schematic design, you may have a certain idea of the points that you're going to get. In some cases, you may get some more. In other cases, some are going to drop out during the course of the project. But I think the bottom line here is that we're really looking to provide something that the school and the district can know if they meet this minimum bar using one of the three options that are in the letter, that they can count on having this base incentive. And then the other part of that is in terms of the incentive process. I think there are some implementation questions. Well, exactly how do you do it and when do you do it? Those are things I think that we can deal with. But I think the certainty is a very important component of the process. And then the last thing I just wanted to highlight, as that's built into the first tier of options, is that it basically, in addition to the DSA HPI review process, that it opens up the process to go through a third-party review system. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, right now a school can go through and become a CHIPS verified school, and DSA has direct access to the CHIPS website where those project pages are maintained. They can look at it, they can get access to it, but then they still have to go through the separate HPI review process. Now, conversely, if you have a project that goes through the HPI review, there's, I think, a lot of confusion out there that they then are also a high performance or a CHIP school. But as has been pointed out by several different people, that the grant incentives are focused on incentivizing primarily the bricks and mortar features of the school and don't deal with some of the other policy and siting issues that are part of the greater CHIPS criteria. And so I think this also provides the opportunity for the HPI process and the CHIPS criteria to come together better. So, you know, I think in summary, you know, I think that we've presented 7 different components to why we think the $250,000 starter incentive is a reasonable, is sort of that just right porridge, and that we're basically committed to working with you today to figure out how to implement such a proposal. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excuse me. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Whether you guys hang out there or like in the first or second row, because I'm sure it'll be one big happy family discussion. Okay. Just before we get there, does DSA, which welcome Kathy Hicks, who's here on behalf of the Division of State Architects, who's sitting on the dais. But I'm wondering if DSA has any comments, because I know some of your proposals were included, if you had anything else.
No, we don't have anything else. Brian covered it very well.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Then what I'd like to do is you guys should probably come back up and sit down, as we'll do open questions instead of, unless you guys want to get exercise today. We'll open it up to the implementation committee members to ask directions. One first, and then Bill.
One of the concerns that the OPSC, actually questions that the OPSC had when we first heard about this $250,000 proposal was we were interested in knowing how this figure came about. But it sounds like, and this, maybe it's a question for you, Bill, that at this point we don't know.
Well, I think it came about I think the starting idea for it was, as I mentioned earlier, that was an amount that had been utilized in the past. Right. But then I've also done some back-of-the-envelope calculations, which was included as the rationale attachment to basically look at, given the history, and both DSA and OPSC have access to more detailed records than I do, but just based on the great information that they've shared with me on a summary basis, basically what I would suggest is that we look at what could this result in if we adopt this proposal. And so another part of the rationale, and this is again looking at that just right porridge, is how many projects do we think are going to come in over the next couple of years looking for the modernization funding that's still out there and the remaining new construction funding. If we adopt a proposal that includes this starter incentive, and then, if you want to as well, the additional funding, how many projects could that entail, and how does that compare? Basically, we don't want to have so many projects that the money runs out, although maybe that would be a good problem. But I don't really anticipate that that's going to be the problem. So the question, basically, if you look at the calculations, given the average size project that's gone through the modernization funding process to date, there have been about 950 modernization projects on the average cost, or at least incentive, for about $1.75 million in the ballpark. That would mean that if you had the same approximate mix of projects, that there would be funding left for about 900 projects. And if you use the $250,000 figure without trying to guess what the additional incentives were going to be, that would mean that there would be incentive funding for about 300 projects, which would be about a third of the projects that would come in the door. I
Bill,
think
can you quickly clarify that? Because my question is are you just using the base 250? Because your proposal is 250 plus points.
Yeah, well, that's using
which would actually mean
correct.
$300,000 or $400,000 per project.
Could be. So I mean, that's actually a good point, Lisa, because one of the other things that is part of our analysis and the rationale is I don't believe that we're going to see that many modernization projects that get that high a points on the scoring. I think we're going to be happy if we get a bunch of 21, 22 point, and then that amount is then going to be reduced by whatever their eligibility is. So, I would expect that maybe instead of 20,000 point-based incentives, maybe you would get an additional 40,000, or instead of 7,000 additional point incentives, you'd get maybe 14,000. So I still think that the main piece that we're looking at is the 250,000. So maybe you get 250 projects instead of 300, but I don't think it's going to be 100 projects instead of 300.
First of all, I want to thank OPSC and Brian Lepask and Juan and all the staff for putting the work group together, because it's a really good example of the way that we can all, as stakeholders, have input, and Brian is extremely dedicated and really knows the subject area, so I appreciate the work that he did. And I want to thank CHIPS for working with Cash on this, and I think it's what I think is being proposed is a way to go beyond just working with the changes to the point system or something like that, but is really to create an incentive starter piece, which I think in the end we may want to try and link with the work that Brian and OPSC have done in terms of some of their changes, because their approach may be workable too. But I have to say that the fundamental issue with this program has nothing to do with the High Performance Schools grants. The fundamental issue is that the modernization grant is too low. And so when you essentially get a percentage increase on nothing, you get nothing. And I know we're not here to solve the modernization grant problem, okay? I agree. But that is the fundamental issue that we're facing. Modernization grants, as Brian pointed out, the average grant for an elementary school is 1.7 million or 1.8. We spend 25 million to modernize our elementary schools. So when you really do it right, when you go in and gut the building and completely rehab every single system or do like-in-kind replacements, the modernization grant funds about 12% of your costs in a school district, okay? And so the grant is so low that whenever you have a percent increase on a low grant, you're going to get low money, and that money that doesn't really meet your needs. So, and I know we're not here to solve that problem, but I just thought I'd, as long as I had the mic. Yeah. Go ahead.
I agree with Bill, but there is also a large number of schools that we have on modernization eligibility on file that they'll be coming in for presumably modernization projects that have, we're talking about small sites. There's a ton of these schools up in the north, and then Central Valley as well, that have very little eligibility. They have very small schools. We could see, if this proposal were to go forward, we could see a lot of schools that are modernizing, 2 or 3 classrooms, and perhaps getting a high performance grant that exceeds their construction grants. So it goes. I'm just saying it goes both ways.
Do a follow up with.
Briefly.
Okay, thanks. So the question that I would have is actually taking that idea to Bill and from CHIPS. Is there in this proposal, which we're a part of, but let me just I'm going to put on my OPSC hat. So you're going to give everybody, I'll do all your work for you. So you're going to give everybody a $250,000 starter grant, even if their project is only $250,000 project? So I think if I was trying to implement this in accordance with good standards, we may want to set some thresholds for a starter or an incentive grant so that we're not essentially doing what Brian just said, giving somebody more money than the actual project cost as an incentive. So the starter grant I think is a good idea, but I don't think we want to be funding a starter grant on a very tiny project, or maybe the starter grant goes down in proportion to the size of the project if you're doing very small modernizations.
We also think that the 7 points that we're giving for prerequisites now are essentially a type of a starter grant. It's 7 free points.
So, Dennis, then Jeff.
Well, I agree with what Bill was saying at the first part of what Bill was saying, that the modernization grants are not enough, and the 7 points are next to nothing. I was doing some quick figuring here this morning. For an average size elementary mod, you would only get about 3,000 more with the 7 points. For middle school, maybe 5,000, and high school 13,000, and that's next to nothing. The 7 points I don't think are sufficient to do that. I agree with, and there are. One of the problems that we've had with both the CHIPS program and the LEAD program is that there's a delinking between the point systems and the actual cost of what those points would be in a project. And you know, we don't have a solution for that, but there, even to get to the minimum threshold of 2027, I can't remember what it is, there are costs that are involved in that. And I think I like the idea of the 250,000. I think the thought of having smaller projects maybe get less than that, I think that's a good incentive to get a project started. I also believe that in this regulatory process for the high performance incentive program, we've messed with the CHIPS point system, and now we're doing that again. I would rather that we leave the CHIPS point system the way it is and just double the amounts. We've worked for, a couple years now with the high-performance grant system and found that it doesn't work, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the amount of funding. If we double the amount and try that for a year or two and see if it gets more people to come in, I think that has a lot more potential. So I would rather see the point system remain the same, but we just give more money. Thank you.
Okay, we have Jeff, Cesar, Deborah, then Chris.
Thank you. I agree with what Bill and Dennis said regarding the scalability of the starter grant, that county offices, which I'm representing, often have smaller projects, and finding that appropriate, just right porridge, to use Bill's words. I don't know if 250 is too much or too little, but I think there needs to be some scalability there. The other point that I wanted to ask about is participation of financial hardship districts in this program. That a financial hardship district should have the opportunity to build a green or high-performing school as well. And so, questions would be how would this starter grant or incentive work with a financial hardship district?
Go ahead.
A financial hardship district would be able to come in and access design funds to get started, just like a regular new construction mod project. So, those projects that have financial hardship status can access design grants, sort of seed money, in advance of the plans, so they can get money up front to get started, whereas regular school districts that don't have financial hardship status have to come in after the plans are designed and completed and approved by the state agencies. So that's an avenue that financial hardships have that they can take. They get some money up front, so they can incorporate some of these things into the design. And I have a follow-up,
Go.
Madam Chair. Brian, can you clarify? I think Dennis was saying that there's only a $3,000 difference with the points. Can you clarify the example that we have on page 3?
Sure.
And what the resulting amounts were, please?
Yeah.
I think it's...
Yeah, I mean, the lower you are on the scale of the number of points you have, the increases go up exponentially as you get higher and higher. And I was looking at, Tim, can I see that, please, again? We have a chart here that we probably should have passed out. I apologize. For a minimal qualifying project, it's a 2%. At 20 points, it's 2%. If you go up to 27 points, it's only 2.18%. And so for a low-performing project, it's probably, I don't know what the numbers are, but I mean, I'd have to see Dennis's math. I'm not really sure, but the higher up you go on the scale, though, I mean, like if you were to take a project, let's see, that's at about 40 points and go up 7 points from there, you're talking about actually over 2% increase. So it would be from, Tim has an example here of a $2 million base grant project that has 38 points, would get a $66,000 grant currently. If you were to add those 7 points onto that 38 for 45, it would go up to $109,000. So that's nearly doubling the grant. So I think Dennis's point's well taken, but it's probably only applicable to projects that are achieving less than like 35 points or so.
But that's where modernization is going to be. It's going to be very difficult for a modernization to get the higher.
We understand that. That's why we added 21 points into our criteria.
And that example, by the way, starting at 38 points and going up to 45, we got that 38 points because that's the average of all modernization HP projects that DSA has looked at.
Jeff, are you done? Or go? Yeah.
One, I understand the design, advanced design apportionment for financial hardship, but that doesn't address the hard costs of this actual construction, of actually building these high-performance items.
in terms of getting the additional grants, I mean, there's and I think the main objective here was to open up the program so that we can award more money for high performance. And I think the way we structured the points and added the additional points, I think that we've achieved that objective. I understand the additional flat grant of 250, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the changes that we've made based on the point system also generates more money, specifically with the prerequisites. And where I mention those because those are just, in the past, it was just something that you had to meet to get points. Now you're getting points. So you get additional points where in the past it was just a prerequisite. So there's additional funds that are being awarded where districts really don't have to do anything extra. So I don't want to lose sight of that. But going back to your question, Jeff, so you're saying that for financial hardship districts that they need additional money besides in comparison to regular districts to get these attributes into the designs?
I think there's two parts to that. One is in relation to the proposal from Chips and Cash. With this $250,000 starter incentive, would that become $250,000 as the state match and then another $250,000 as the hardship portion? And the other is that we need to make the grant amounts to be realistic to actually cover the cost of construction because financial hardship can't go over our grant amount.
Okay, just so you remember, I kind of call people in order, so make sure you write your questions down so you don't forget it. So next is Cesar, Deborah, Chris, Juan, then Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the point system and some of the prerequisites, we're looking through the materials and wanted to get more information on where HVAC and insulation fits in. I didn't see it in the additional points.
Might be able to.
It's not.
HVAC and insulation would be integrated into some of the energy points. Insulation is involved in the energy calculations in the Title 24, and this grant goes over and above that by a certain percentage, and you get extra points. And I think we've increased that quite a bit. And
Okay.
and then HVAC, I'll have Lydia talk to because she's a mechanical engineer.
Thank you.
You're saying increasing, put in a high efficiency?
Can you lean a little bit? It's hard to hear you.
Okay, do you mind repeating the question? I'm sorry.
Sure, I was wondering if you could explain where HVAC fits in the point system with regards to the prerequisites or the additional points.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is the EE 1.1, which is the where you get now at 1 point, and in addition is the EE 1.1, the performance energy, which is like she said, it includes in the energy report. The more efficient your HVAC system is, the more energy that you will get on your overall building. That's more energy savings, more points.
Right, I understand.
As far as the regulations
How is it
go,
weighted?
that's down in section C1 and C1A and B.
Okay.
Oh, what stamp page?
Stamp page 5.
Yeah, it's the attachment. Regulation section 1859.71.6 and go down to C1A and 2.
Which were increased by 6 points.
Also, if you have your energy systems monitored on an energy management system, we allow a point for that now as well in our proposal, so that helps with it too.
And the commissioning also works extensively with HVAC, so that's highly important in that system.
And we added 2 points to enhance commissioning.
Cesar, you good?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Deborah, then Chris, then Juan.
Well, Jeff sort of took my question about the financial hardship, but one, you said that those districts already receive money for their planning for a high-performance school. Can you tell me what that amount is?
Not necessarily just for high performance, but they get a design grant. Financial hardship districts get a design grant in advance of having the plans approved by CTE and DSA.
So how would this program roll into that?
It would be no different. You would get a percentage of what the calculated total amount would be up front to get started and get the plans approved through the different agencies.
Mm-hmm. Just another comment from a small school district perspective. When we built our middle school about 5 years ago, we met with some CHIPS folks and tried to go down that route, and we couldn't afford it. It was not feasible either in design or in implementing. The dollars were not available. So I like this approach to it. I think it will help and be an incentive for schools to do it because we were very interested in it, but the bottom line was couldn't afford it.
Deborah, can you go into a little bit more detail as to what exactly why you couldn't afford it? Like the cost?
The cost, it was cost prohibitive with the grant amount that we had from the state, and we were already ponying up much more than our 50-50 share to do the project. And so when we met with the CHIPS folks, we tried to do it, and there just wasn't the money.
What part of it made it unfeasible?
I'll start with the design and analysis for one, and then when you're talking about the energy efficiency, the materials and the systems cost a lot more than the other ones that you can get at a lower rate that don't produce. And when you're looking at that, I mean, if you are looking at it long-term, you can pencil it out, but the bottom line is you don't have that upfront money, that initial money, to make it work. We could not afford it.
Just to clarify, Deborah, this is a new construction or modernization?
It was a new construction.
New construction.
Mhm.
So it would, thank you.
Okay. It'll be Chris, Juan, Dennis, then Bill.
Sure. Chris Ferguson, Finance. The administration is opposed to any proposals that would relax the CHIP standards. We believe that the points proposals there would relax those standards. We are willing to consider Dennis's proposal on the percentages. That is something that we can take back to management and increasing the incentive itself.
Oh, wait, I don't
And
understand
when I say Dennis's proposal, his last statement was increasing the incentive itself as opposed to reducing or increasing.
That's Cash's.
Okay. Well, I'm just making it clear that that's something that we're willing to take back and consider, but we're inflexible at this time on any proposals to increase the number of points or to relax the standards, which is what we believe this would do by giving, say, 7 points for prerequisites currently. If we give points for those now, we'll be effectively relaxing the standards. That's not something we're willing to consider.
It's important to note that those prerequisites are above and beyond code. Our criteria is set above and beyond code, and that's why we're attaching points to them.
We understand that, and when this program was originally developed, that was the understanding. That's something that we're inflexible on at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Juan?
I wanted to go back to Jeff's question and ask Bill and Ian, what the 250, is that the state share or is that the total amount that's being proposed?
Well, we see that as being the state share and the total amount, so we don't see it as a matching piece.
Okay.
So explain again, because I thought I clarified that the 250 would just be the base, and then based on how much money they got with points, that would be added on to the base.
That's correct.
That's your proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
And then that whole amount would be split in half, right? State share versus district share?
Or 60-40, yeah.
That's not
If
what
it's
we're.
not, it would be-
That's not what we're proposing for
Okay, that's what I'm
for the
wanting to
start.
clarify. I'm confused on that, too. so.
Well, you're after. Lisa, I'll have you after Bill. How about that? Okay. Dennis, Bill, then Lisa, and then...
Okay, question, I just want to understand really
So
how we're breaking out the grant.
What I understand, if let me interpret CHIPS of what they're saying, is that it would be a 250 base grant, entirely state money.
Yes.
Entirely state money.
In other words, 250 from the state with no match from the district.
Correct.
That's what
That would be the base grant, automatic from the state, and then they would get money from the points base thereafter that would be added on. Now, would that be split, or is that entirely?
Right.
those grants have to be.
That would be, however, the current system structure.
Okay, so then they would split. So it'd be a fully state 250, and then on top of that, whatever the points were, then that would be the matching.
Yes.
Okay, that clarifies. So then it would be 60-40 basically, if it was a mod project, whatever additional beyond the 250. Well, actually, I guess for mod, it's for 250. Okay. So anything beyond the 250 would then be split 60/40 if it was mod, or 50/50 if it's new construction.
Yeah, and the new construction proposal actually is a 150 instead of a 250.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Same idea, though.
Okay. Dennis, Bill?
I have a question and a comment. A question for Juan. Under the current program for a hardship district, if it's new construction, does the state pay twice the amount for the incentive grants for a hardship district, since the state pays both the state and local for the regular grants? Do they pay both the state and local for the
Yeah.
incentive grants?
Yeah,
They do.
for financial hardships, for new construction, the state pays for 100% of the total project cost.
Okay. Then the other comment that I have was, I think when this program was set up, and even when CHIPS was set up a long time ago, the principle was, and one of the reasons why there's not a direct connection between the points and the cost, is that things would average out. In other words, you would take some incentives that may not cost anything, and then you would have others that cost a lot. Well, that works, but it only works when you have big projects in which you can include a lot of different things that would average out. One of the problems that we have with modernization projects that are smaller is that you don't have that opportunity. You don't have that opportunity to include a lot of things that might average out. And that's another reason why I think the CHIPS and cash proposal of having that $250,000 up front works a lot better, particularly for the small and the modernization projects. Thank you.
Okay. Bill, then Lisa?
I just wanted to go further into the hardship piece, because I think there is an equity issue here. I mean, I think we can sit here and say that hardship districts are eligible to receive funding up front and they can do CHIP schools, but the reality is that, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't think there's ever been a high-performance hardship school, or am I wrong? Somebody got one? You do? Okay, now how, so we need to know how you do it within the hardship program. So maybe at some point we could ask Whale to give us an example, because my concern is that we're creating a whole series of districts that are second-class districts that can't ever access funds for high-performance schools.
Well, and I think
So maybe we could.
Yeah, and I think the valid question actually is, because got a big district, has there ever been a medium to small size district that has done that? Because big districts have a little bit more flexibility, whether hardship or not, to a certain extent.
So just to finish up, and I think part of what I think we're engaged in here is a process of looking at a program that's not working very well and not getting the money out. And there's a lot of different aspects to that, and that's one. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff we need to talk about today in addition to this, and not just with the CHIPS and cash proposal and not just what OPSC's done, but hardship is something I think we should try and address as a way to, what I'm hearing that we're about is trying to fix a program that's not working very well. And so there's a lot of facets that we need to cover today. So anyway.
Lisa, then Chris, then Deborah?
I'm good. It was basically just my
Okay.
question, so I'm good. Thank you.
All right, Chris, then Deborah?
On the $250,000 flat grant proposal, what would be the qualifying criteria, or would schools just automatically be eligible for $250,000 and not have to do any high-performance attributes?
The proposal would be that they would have to do one of three things. They would either need to go through the current HPI review by DSA and get 20 or 27 points respectively, that they would go through the third-party CHIPS verified program and meet the minimum requirements of that, or they would go through LEED certification.
So those three are ands as opposed
Those are
to
ors.
ors.
Those are ors.
So if I'm a school that's LEED certified, I get the $250,000 whether or not my project has any high-performance attributes, correct?
It would have to have high-performance attributes.
You can't do it without having high.
Well,
That's how it works.
It's, and I think that's something that with the cash proposal and the CHIPS proposal, as I was reading through, didn't make a lot of sense because it wasn't linked. For those of us who are new and don't have all the basis of the background, it was not clearly that, if your CHIPS verified, you're actually above the points, or that if you're lead verified, you're above the points in that regard. So are you okay with that, Chris? Okay, it'll be...
I'd question the legal authority for the board to give away DSA's authority to review those projects.
Absolutely. So it'll be Deborah, then Dennis, then Bill?
One, with the proposal that, or the review that you just did, have you calculated out, I know I heard one gentleman say that they anticipated funding at least 300 projects. With OPSC's proposal, do you have any idea how much of an increase you're going to see?
We could stretch it out over about 400 to 500 projects, we think, if you use the averages. It's pretty hard to nail it down exactly, but it would actually fund more schools.
We looked at an average base grant of $2 million for MOD, and an average of, we looked at 45 points, because that's what the project we were looking at had. And under the proposed regs, that would provide an average of $185,000 in HPI grants per project, just an average. It would vary a lot. And that average is enough for 400 high-performance schools, which means sufficient incentive funding for nearly half of the modernization projects that can be funded with remaining Prop 1D funds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dennis?
Yes, having said the comment about the CHIPS certification and LEED certification being higher standards, I do have a little bit of a problem with using those as a criteria. One is that I believe that LEED certification comes after the project is complete, after the construction is complete, and therefore it would be difficult at the time of the funding approval and DSA approval to use that as criteria. The other one is that there are differences between the CHIP standards, currently the CHIP standards and the high-performance grant standards, and I don't necessarily object to using that. However, there is going to have to be a process to adjust the point levels to the high-performance grant from the CHIPS verified process.
So it would just make it more complicated.
Not a lot, but but I also believe that, and I'm not sure if DSA is doing this currently, that there's an opportunity to have third-party providers do all the verification of the CHIPS points. I mean, there's plenty of people out in the state that are available to do that, and that could
And I'll just be
decrease the workload.
very clear from Lisa Kaplan as the AEO, not having talked to my board members, but at this point, I've not seen where it would be legal in the state of California to do that, to have a third-party review when something's already been set up in state programs and verified with state money. So unless somebody has an attorney come and talk to me about how it could potentially be legal for third-party review, my starting position is opposition for third-party review.
That's already established. I mean, the plan review for DSA is being farmed out to third parties. So I don't see this as being any different than that.
But it's state-controlled, same standards, state-controlled, internal within state, state contracting under state terms. Ms. Hick?
Also with strict statutory and regulatory requirements on how we go through the contracting process, a rotation cycle, and all sorts of other features that go with it. And so what you're proposing would be a sole source violation also, that CHIPS be automatically given all the work that we're going to do instead of using the public contract code to go through the process of creating a list of contractors to do the work.
So, Bill, you're next, but just so you know, I wanted to make it very clear where my starting point was. Until somebody shows me that it's legal, my advice to my board is that it's not. Bill, and then Mary?
So, we went through this discussion at the beginning of the program. I think for those of us that were there when Rob Cook was running that and setting the program up. And, we're pretty far down the road of having a state program with state incentive items in the HPI that are linked back originally to the CHIPS standards. I think it's a shame in some ways, that we went down that road and didn't use these existing high-performance criteria systems in the beginning. I understand that there are good reasons that we didn't do it. I don't have a problem ending up where we're ending up. I think one of the positive sides of having a state set of standards is that the state can then incentivize various areas. So, for example, on Juan and what Brian has done with OPSCs here, they have incentivized far beyond what's in CHIPS, renewable energy. And that is something that the state of California wants to incentivize. So it does give you, as a state, some opportunity to focus the program in ways that you want to focus it, depending upon political situation or where we want to go as a society. But, I mean, so unfortunately, we're very far down the road of having our own standards. And so I could, well, I'm really sympathetic to having CHIPS be used and having CHIPS verified or LEED be used. And the reason why is that there's a ton of confusion amongst practitioners. Okay, because we've already got two systems. We've got, LEED for schools, we've got CHIPS. Everybody's all set up. Every architect has LEED AP behind their name now, right? So they're all used to that. They're all selling everyone down that, and all of a sudden you've got the third system, the HPI grant, and it's extremely confusing in the marketplace. And so it has created a lot of confusion, but the flip side of it is we're already really far down the road. The horse is out of the barn. And there would be a lot of work to be done to go back and retranslate, especially if, let's say, the state decided that we were all going to adopt LEED for schools as one of the standards along with CHIPS. The LEED points are completely different in the way that they're set up from the CHIPS points and from the HPI points. Completely different focus. And so the translation and the work required to make those systems somehow mesh to get us back to where we are now, I think would be extremely difficult. So I'm not necessarily happy that we've ended up here, but we're here, and I'm not sure it's worth the trouble to go back and throw the whole thing out and start over.
Okay, Mary?
Well, thanks, Bill, for saying most of what I was going to say, but I did want to point out that under the High Performance Incentive Grant, it's very clear that there's supposed to be the focus needs to be on facilities. And the other programs offer points for things that are not facilities related. And so that translation effort that Bill was just talking about would be incredibly difficult.
It'll be
Better give Bill a chance to respond.
Yeah. Chris, Sean, and Bill, but hold on just a second. I want to pause, write your questions down. Bill, you can comment in just a second. One of the things that I want to see if there is a somewhat consensus on, let's say we live in fantasy world, which I try and live in as much as possible, but is there agreement, do we have any problem with the changes in the regs that OPSC has suggested? Besides wanting a base grant, besides wanting more points, are we in agreement? Do we have some sort of consensus as on page 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 with how there have been reg changes?
Well, I think one of the questions that I think, before we get there, because the changes that are being proposed, what I see on page 3 are, and an example shows what the impact would be on the number of points and the potential dollar value. So I'm answering this question in a long way. The CHIPS and cash proposal, in addition to the famous starter grant, includes a proposal to double the points.
Okay.
So
but
I'm just,
I
what
get
I want
it,
is there equivalency?
No.
In the amounts, that's what I'm asking.
Okay,
So I
what
can feel
I know,
comfortable.
yes, I understand, but what I'm saying right now, because you have to realize, even though SB 1193 has been introduced and CHIPS is going forward with their own proposal through legislation, even if that's signed, it won't go into law until January. We have to go through the Office of Administrative Law. That still takes 4 to 5 months. So this program, nothing, or 6, as Chris says. So one of the things I want to kind of give pause and start now as we move forward, I want people to take a look at the regulations. we may not agree. There may be several different proposals that go in front of the SAB. But is there agreement or consensus? I don't care about the points. I don't want to care about the dollars. Don't talk to me about the dollars. Don't talk to me about, don't talk to me about chips. Do you have problems with how this is written? You may think there need to be more points.
The proposal or the way they change?
The reg changes.
The reg changes,
They
just
haven't-
reg
They haven't
changes.
explained all the reg changes, Madam Chair. If we did that, maybe then we could agree on them. So, for
Were
example...
you here when we were in
Go
front of
through them.
No,
Go through
hold
them.
on. There are several areas of reg changes that I see underlined that were not explained to the committee.
Are the reg,
I'll go through them.
the
I'll go through
additions?
them.
Thank you, Brian.
Are they based on the new CHIPS criteria,
No,
or are those
cleanup
just?
stuff.
They were based on
Right,
the changes that we made. I'll tell you where they came from.
CE.
Yeah, so I apologize, I've kind of removed and started a new direction, but I want to get through this. So let's have Brian go through and explain specific reg changes, because I want to start on a base on somewhere
We can
before
just
we
go-
start getting into,
We'll go through each
alternate
section.
universes.
The first change is on stand page 5, underwater. We increased the reduction of potable water for landscaping and indoor use from 1 to 2 points to 1 to 3 points. I think I covered that. This is something that was popular with legislative staff, and that was brought to our work group meeting, and we all agreed upon that at the work group meetings. This is a perfect segue for what Teresa was just reminding me of. We also updated our regulations to incorporate current California Energy Code, which was effective January 1 of this year, right? So, yeah, so now that's now updated in our regulations, too.
Could I ask, I wanted to, could we ask Brian to just make a point of discussing this in terms of what I heard Chris object to was some way that we were watering down the standards by allowing a point for a prerequisite, and I think it's important for us, for OPSC to emphasize, for example, that this prerequisite of meeting a higher energy code that's significantly higher does not represent any kind of watering down or providing points, money for not doing anything.
No, but if you get 7 points for prerequisites what are currently prerequisites, you have now projects qualifying for funding that otherwise wouldn't qualify for funding. Furthermore, the overall goal of this program is to incentivize high-performance schools.
Brian,
It's an incentive
can you
to do.
explain-
I understand where Chris is coming from, but I really do. But I think that I would suggest that we should have perhaps not made these prerequisites should have had points attached from the beginning, because they are above and beyond code. They're prerequisites. When we say prerequisites, they're not prerequisites. They're in our criteria. They're prerequisites.
Correct.
Code is below that, so they're already performing high. They're already above the standard, and that's why we felt that points were appropriate for them.
And the code changed from, what they're putting in here is the 2008. This used to
So
be
we're making it easier to
2005.
qualify, thus we are.
No, not at all.
It costs more money.
No, it costs more money to
Costs more
meet
money
this code.
qualify.
We have
No,
increased cost to
I'm
meet
saying in
the code.
terms of the incentive grant.
No.
You get 7 points now for these prerequisites, so now you only have to get, what, an additional 15 before you match, or not 15, 13 to get your 20, and you
Chris,
get your
with updating to the code, and I can tell you from a school district perspective, because we've looked at this with Natomas, with updating the code and having to comply with that code, these are higher level prerequisites, which actually are going to cost more. So it's not washing down, it actually increased the standards. So no, these are now already going to be required for that 20 points, and they're already in there, and it's more expensive, so it's actually it's a rational basis to provide points for that.
Correct. So they receive funding for what they already have to do to qualify for this program.
Chris, no, you are expected to perform at a higher level, and there's no increased funding for it.
Currently.
Then
If
it
this
could be.
proposal went through, it would be easier, therefore, to qualify for the
No.
incentive.
I believe at this point, we probably should agree to disagree.
Can I make an explanation?
Yeah.
It was our idea to come up with the prerequisites. We find people cannot meet the acoustical one. It is very difficult, and that is something that is not code required. It requires a consultant to be involved as well, and we felt for them to just get on the board, they needed some money to get there. And so we felt that in order to increase the grant, which was being requested, this is one way to make it happen, and it automatically happens with some type of behavioral change as well. Additionally, I'd like to comment that the Energy Code 2008 from the 2005 has changed 8%. And one of the main reasons we need to make these reg changes is that we have school districts making calculations for the new code, which is required, and the old code to do the HPI. And it's very cumbersome. Well, it's actually an easy to do on Energy Pro. However, it's cumbersome in explaining it to everybody why we have an old code for regulations on an incentive grant and a new code for that, so they have to do two. So it's very important that at least that portion does get accepted, because it's contradictory.
Okay. Brian, on the regs?
Okay, down at the bottom of stamp page 5, the last underline you see is the plug loads that are monitored on an energy management system. We added that into the criteria. Also from DSA's suggestion. The next one at the top of page 6, renewable energy previously was 1 to 7 points because it only went up to 35% of on-site of energy produced on-site for renewable energy. Excuse me. That's been increased to 95% from 35%, which is considered grid neutral. And so we didn't want to change the existing scale of assigning 1 point for every 5% up to 35. So we kept that. We added 1 more point for getting 5% up to 40%, and then after that, it's 1 point for every 10%. And then there's a 2-point bonus from between 90 and 95 to actually becoming grid neutral. Like we're trying to reward people. Truthfully, I don't think it's expected that too many people can get all the way to grid neutral at this point, but if they are able to, they'll be awarded.
Some school districts are getting to 75.
Yeah. We're seeing it getting closer and closer. Moving down to, just below that, we also added 1 point for fundamental building systems testing and training. That's above code currently. And we heard a lot in our work group meetings about how important commissioning and enhanced commissioning is. For those of you that don't know, enhanced commissioning is basically you have a commissioning agent that's involved all the way from the design all the way through to post-construction, and they help those systems be tuned correctly and so that they work up to their expected standard. And it's very important, and it's been identified as maybe the most important piece of installing these components, so we wanted to reward that as well. Moving down to the materials section. We have 2 prerequisites there, one for storage and collection of recyclables and one for construction waste management. Again, they're above code. And then down to indoor environmental quality. This is an area that we were asked by the Department of Education to maybe focus on a little bit. One of the things that came up was the replacement of existing lamps with low mercury lamps. And then also, we attached 2 points to the minimal acoustical performance. As Teresa talked about just a minute ago, it's very expensive and very long process to go through to get those. The other changes we made were basically, if you look at the bottom of stamp page 7 and over at the end on stamp page 9, we basically just carried down the existing formula we had for projects that were coming in under the 2006 CHIP standards, or criteria, I should say, sorry. We just added the total amount of points. We increased it from where it was at to where it's at now for the additional points that are available from the reg changes we made. So I think the new construction points went up from 75 to 94, and mods went up from, the top used to be 72 and now it's 96. Or 77 to 96, excuse me. So does that help, Bill? Okay.
We're going to go Dennis, Chris, Bill. Oh, well, actually, yes, Sean. Sorry.
Sean's going to go first? You're passing?
So Dennis, Chris, Sean, Bill.
Just on this issue of changing the regs, first of all, I'd like to say that the CHIPS organization has been working on the best practices and the criteria for 10 years? Yep. 10 years. They've put a great deal of effort with professionals all over the state, now all over the country, into their criteria. They have a lot of research. They have a lot of basis for the CHIPS standards. I don't think we should be messing with that. I think that we should stay with the CHIPS standards the way they are, and not try and create, as Bill said before, we're getting a lot of confusion between the different standards out there, LEEDs, CHIPS, and now high performance. I think we should stay with what has been proven with the CHIPS standards. That having been said, I also believe that the biggest problem is not having enough money per point, and therefore the cash and CHIPS proposal of doubling the amount for the points is a valid way to do this, rather than trying to mess around and figure out which points should be getting more dollars than other points.
Okay, Chris?
Just to piggyback on what Dennis is saying, effectively, we concur with the CHIPS proposal. We believe that we need to stick with the CHIPS standards, so we concur in those areas. In terms of the points and furthering what you're saying, would it be possible to have the exercise of, instead of adding additional points for these activities, figuring out what the percentage increase would be and looking at it in those terms? So instead of, say, right now, if you added those additional points that they're proposing, it would equate to, say, a 2% bump. Looking at it from that perspective, and instead saying, instead of 9%, 11%, if that's an exercise that can be done.
I suppose we might be able to do that.
And I think it's too complex, because
I think so,
with the
too.
different combinations of points.
Well, effectively, I'm getting at what you're saying is, instead of doing points, can we look at what the percentage change would need to be, or what would it look like under various proposals? And then also, I don't know if the information's available, but do we know what percentage of the incremental cost increases is covered by this grant?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So, for example, if I have to replace the lamps, and I have a cost for replacing the lamps of, say, $1, and if I use a low mercury lamp, that lamp is $1.20. Do we know what percentage this incentive grant covers of the 20-cent increase, the incremental difference? Because that's what this is designed to cover, is the incremental difference.
It's a very complex part of the design process that we go through. Probably the best program that the state of California runs is called the Bright Schools program. They provide free energy consulting for districts to go through that exact process. And what comes out of it is you look at if you wanted to change a lamp and we wanted to change it to mercury, what's the incremental additional cost to do it, the payback time, the number of points you would get, the grant. So, but this occurs in a really complex environment while you're designing the school, and you make decisions based upon a whole series of analyses that you do for basic systems and components. And so it's kind of complex to do it in the broad brush thing here, but we go through that process as districts all the time. And unfortunately, I will say that program has been discontinued by CEC because they have too much on their plate. But if the administration was looking for a way to really focus on cost effectiveness and having people understand about cost effectiveness in high performance, that program is the best program the state ever had.
And I'd just like to say that it's more complex than just the Bright Schools program can show. I mean, if you put in daylighting, it has an impact on the heat loads, it has an impact, and the HVAC. It's a part of the design process that is extremely complex, and trying to nail down this point is going to give you this amount of money, and this increase is impossible.
Okay, we're going to have Sean, Bill, and then we're going to take a 10-minute break and come back.
I'd like to know from other school districts or architects or whomever whether or not any of these proposals will result in school districts incorporating high-performance features when they weren't otherwise considering it. Because it seems like all the proposals will increase the grant, and I think that's great. I want to know if this will actually increase the participation as well.
feel free to answer if you'd like to. And we'll take public comment to a certain extent briefly on this if that's.
I could maybe indicate something to that, is that the input we got from school districts that were attending our work group meetings seem to agree with the approach that we're taking, that it would help them, that it would incentivize these grants, yes. Yeah.
Mary?
I can speak to a specific example of a project that I'm working on now where the amount of the grant, it's currently estimated at about $36,000, and the owner is saying, it's going to cost me more than $36,000 to get that. $250,000 would change the equation.
Okay. And then Bill, and we'll go to a 10-minute break.
Which bill?
Or, sorry. You had kind of looked.
Sorry, I have a question about the actual regulation. In the spirit of the IMP committee of trying to parse every sentence on earth here, on page 7, I don't understand, if we're not using CHIPS, in the underlined section, you say, for those projects accepted by DSA utilizing the 2009 California CHIPS criteria. And as I look up above, I see that we had some grandfathering issues, as I recall, when we first did the regulations, and I see all of the CHIPS things referenced in here, but I thought we just had a discussion about we have a state high-performance schools grant standard or program and not CHIPS, and I'm surprised to see that written the way it's written. I'm just, why is it there exactly? I don't understand.
Brian, would you, or Kathy, do you have the answer of why it was written that way?
We keep talking about the high-performance standards, the LEED standards and CHIP standards. I think when we initially set up the funding, it's a funding model that we created using the CHIP standard. So what we're talking about today and the regulations that we're changing is changing a funding model based on the CHIPS criteria. It's not that we have our own standard adopted by the state. We've created a funding model.
Okay, and so, I mean, this, I don't know, just the way it's written, it seems to say that this, if you go through the 2009 CHIPS criteria, then you'll qualify for the points. I just don't quite understand, so anyway, it looks like it's more of a kind of holdover from what was originally done when we started the program, but anyway.
As it goes back to the original, it's just establishing and furthering what was created back then. Because if you look up through what hasn't been changed, it's just mirroring what was done before. So based on that level of little confusion, let's return in 10 minutes. Seems like we're going to be here until 3:30. So plan on lunch, let's say maybe at about 12:15 to 1:15, and then come back and finish. So let's do a 10-minute break now. Resume at 11:10, as I can barely see over there, and then we'll go for another hour or so.
Before we move forward and start talking about proposals or options, is to start talking about the reasons why we have this problem. Thank you.
Well, could you also address, being a financial hardship district, how you build schools?
Yes. To clarify here, our school district was in hardship status, but the school district had been out of hardship for almost 18 months. We made the decision to move forward with new construction, no modernization, to have a high-performance component added to all new construction projects in the district. That was not done based on any financial incentives. In fact, we believe that the existing incentive is very inadequate and not sufficient. So just wanted to clarify, we have projects that are hardship, but we are not in hardship status at this point in time. So I do see a major challenge for hardship school districts to participate in the high-performance grant. And I wanted to clarify also a comment made about design funding for high performance for projects that are hardship with high performance. The design portion is 20% of the basic grant, and therefore there will be no additional design money for the high performance for the projects that are hardship and with high performance component, because there is no points established at that point in time when you submit for a grant.
Yeah, Deborah, then.
Didn't you raise your hand when you said that you had built a high-performance school with hardship?
No, we have received approval from the state for projects that are high performance and hardship status. They are in the unfunded list, and one of them just been apportioned recently.
Rob?
And so I had the same question because again, financial hardship projects, similar to grant adequacy, I think with regard to this program will speak to whether or not the program pays for itself. And kind of to Chris's question and Sean's question, you mentioned this as well. It's inadequate in terms of the funding you get for qualifying in the program to the real costs it takes when you build the school. So I had that question, but it sounds like you have not actually built one through the financial hardship.
No, we have not built a project with high performance component in hardship status.
And then you brought to mind, it's just a point that I wanted to make, is that some districts are just making it a priority to build schools that at the same time happen to meet the CHIPS criteria, or in this case, the HPI criteria, but regardless of the financial incentives they do or don't get from the state. And so it's difficult as we sit here and say how many districts will take advantage of it, because if it's a priority by your board to just do that, you're going to do it regardless of the funding.
And that's exactly the reason that we did it. Actually, the incentive of this program is actually the name more than actually the amount of dollars. Being a high performance, a green school, that's what everyone desires in our community. That would the district believe that the right thing to do for our students, as well as for future bond. That's our community seek that as well. So,
Deborah?
Somebody maybe in DSA or OPSC, how many districts outside of LA Unified and San Bernardino have done a high-performance school? One?
No, we got audience members.
Oh, no, new construction, Bill.
These are all like-in-kind replacement modernization projects, so they're new construction mods. We get 48 points, 45, 41, 42. They've got a list for them, I think.
I think about half of the projects have been LA's projects, and we've had a few districts like Bill's and like Sweetwater down in San Diego that have done a handful. So
with large local bonds, that's what
35-ish.
I can name a few: Marysville, San Leandro,
Dry Creek,
Arcadia, Lake Tahoe, Oakland.
Were they using bonds, or were they just doing
They'd have to.
They have to.
local money?
Oh,
Local entity.
Right.
yeah. Murrieta, Merced, Union, Sweetwater, which is.
So on a percentage basis, what would that be in relationship to the total number of schools built?
With HPI.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would you say? 50% is LAUSD?
Excluding LA Unified and San Bernardino.
We'd have to.
I think the point that I am trying to drive here is
Roughly.
this grant doesn't tie to anything other than whatever you're with your proposal or the CHIPS proposal, and Chris was kind of going down this road. It doesn't address the cost to do the program. The dollars, there's a disconnect for this. And I think it's a step forward to give more money, but I don't see a relationship in this program funding what they want you to do.
We got Juan, then Dennis.
I wanted to follow up on some of Will's comments, and I think Rob talked about this, but I think specifically in your district, Will, your board made the decision to go forward with this type of program. What did it take for them to go there? Do you know? I mean, I know that we're talking about high performance and getting that as an incentive, but generally speaking, for school district boards, I mean, it's a decision that they take to move forward in the projects, and I think, Sean, your district has one implemented as well, but do you know what it takes to get a board on board with this approach?
Well, there are various reasons. Some of it is true need or, something that the community desires or the community is talking about. There are political reasons. There are, actually looking for the future for the bond. There are many reasons in this situation here. I mean, everyone is talking about high performance and green schools, and the board is listening and moving forward in that direction, and the staff is also following that pursuit as well. But knowing it was not based on financial incentive.
Right.
Shauna, Rob, do you have any comments on what took your board to get there?
I'll give you a very, very simplified answer: money. I mean, we had the money to do it. We had the will to do it. So once we got to a point where the district said it was important, we were in a position to be able to move forward. I don't think that there are very many school districts that are in that same position.
And just in our case, it's lack of money. I mean, we've always tried hard to build to the grant, and this is a step that we want to take. We just don't have the money to take that step. And so, at the CASH conference, we talked about the green code and what's coming out, and I think, we were pretty candid. At least what we heard was those voluntary steps will most likely start to become mandated over time, and it will eventually become a grant adequacy discussion. It's not going to be something that we're asked to do. It's going to be something that's mandated in code, and then it's going to become a grant adequacy, and hopefully it takes care of itself. It's what happens between now and then. So our case, we're not doing it because we can't afford to do it.
And Juan, I've kind of told you this, and this is Lisa Kaplan as a school board member. I'm part of a board that approved and passed a resolution in support of this probably 3, 4, almost 5 years ago. One, we had passed a bond, so yeah, we had the money to. But two, I was with a board that also believed in building healthy schools because kids and just all the benefits. So we had the district staff do the research, provide us the research, so we actually knew, even though it cost more up front, that on the back end, 20 years from now, our buildings were going to be maintaining and not cost as much on the back end. But because we had the money, local money, bond money, it made that decision a lot easier, and we were dedicated to doing that. I think even if we had less of the bond money, my board would have still pushed forward with that. So I think it's a great opportunity, thinking about this, of knowing, and this is my plug to everybody in the room, CSBA's conference is in San Francisco in December. What we need is more education to the board members, more specific, you in the industry providing workshops to board members that are valuable in this regard to say what the benefit is. Because I got to tell you, I went to every green workshop that CSBA did last, they weren't worth it. They weren't worth it. It's the information we get here, the specific, what a school district did and why, and how you educate board members that this is a good thing using specific examples. So to the extent that even DSA, it's in San Francisco, so you can drive there and back, OPSC would love to be involved. I hope CASH considers doing education, because I think it's really educating the board members, because it takes leadership on the board to get this through. It doesn't matter how much your facilities director or anybody else, it's the board that's got to make that decision. Yeah,
and so, again, our board is in the same place that your board is. The difference is our bond was passed, some 12 years ago, and it's wrapping up, and there's very little money left. And although we'd like to do it, we don't have the money to do it. And so there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And so school boards in the state hear leaders from different organizations say, yeah, this is easy, and it doesn't make sense that people aren't taking advantage of it. And so it does create a dilemma, because they're hearing it's a very complex matter, and so it's not as easy as just do it. For some districts, if I can tell you quite honestly, as we move forward, if we pass another bond, it's going to have this in it. We're going to have the costs in this program. It saves the general fund money. Now's the best time to be speaking of those things. And so, again, at the conference, we heard a gentleman kind of stand up and emotionally say, hey, when we said we were going to go to the moon, we did it. And so this is something that we all have to do, we all want to do, so let's just do it. And I joked with him, the difference is the trip to the moon got funded, and we're still sitting here, fund it, we'll do it. We'd love to do it. It's the right thing to do.
Okay, Dennis and Deborah?
I think a lot of the school board members should go to the Green School Summit rather than maybe the CSBA conference, because that's a very good conference and it has a lot of good information. I think one of the reasons why we're seeing more and more school districts pass resolutions is just because they're becoming more aware of the issues and more aware of the benefits, and it's becoming much more socially responsible and fiscally responsible to do this. So that's my little plug. But I wanted to ask Juan a question about what Weo was saying on the upfront grants for hardship districts. Is there a way that districts can get an increase in their or take into account potential high-performance grants in that 20% funding in design? Is there any way that they could take advantage of that?
I think at that point, it'd be difficult to know because you don't have the plans approved yet. So how many points or how much of an increase would you give somebody if you don't know that they meet certain criteria?
I think one of the things perhaps in the proposal that Chips and Cash have out there with the $250,000 is that perhaps part of that for hardship districts could be made available to districts during the design phase to do feasibility studies and analysis in order just to get on board with a high-performance program.
Deborah?
Just a comment, like with Rob and Dennis was saying, politically boards are taking these actions because they want to be responsible. We know it's good for kids. We know it's better for the environment. We know that it's cost effective. But right back at what Rob said, if you want to go to the moon, you really do need a space shuttle to get there. You can't sit on your wagon on the ground and think you're going to make it. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other public comment? Go ahead, finish well.
If I may, the second part of our proposal is actually related to when the districts should get the funding allocated or assigned. And one of the reasons that I think this program is not very popular because you only receive the funding apportionment or allocation when you submit for construction, which means the school districts will have to move forward with the design and apply for through the DSA, and then when there is also funding available to match the local match, they submit for construction. By that time, there is a possibility that the funding for this program is not going to be available because other school districts will, with other projects, will exhaust that amount. This actually happened to the school district, our school district, before in the prior program, the energy program. By the time when we submitted our application for construction, we lost on $1 million for 2 projects. And my suggestion or our proposal is to take a look at the other programs that we have, something similar to the CTE, and see if the funding can be addressed in that fashion so school districts in advance have the ability to know that they will be receiving funding from this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Samish. I'm an architect with Lionakis, and I'm also the design representative on the CHIPS board. I wished I had my binder. I was meant to bring it today. It's 4 inches thick, and it is the work we are just doing right now for the HPI. So I support very much what he just said about costs being incremental. There is work, not that it's an extra cost necessarily. Sometimes it can be absorbed, but there is effort that it takes to do this. I'd just like to make one comment overall about the modernization program, different from new construction. One of the things that I've done on the CHIPS board is look at the studies that have come out, and a lot of studies on green buildings have come out in 2009. I've mentioned some of these before. There are almost no modernization and renovation green projects in America. It is surprising. You would be shocked at how few there are because it's very difficult to do. All of the effort, all of the conferences Green Summit, everything, talk about new construction. This proposal is on the cutting edge of, it's the next going to the moon, in my opinion. It just isn't happening anywhere. And one of the reasons you're not getting much is because it's hard to do, and the funding's inadequate, everything we've talked about. So I'd just like to say that. I think you asked about what I'd call the tipping point. What makes districts do it or not? And I have some anecdotal evidence that went through. I was the project manager for the Alder Creek Middle School. It's one of the first demonstration schools that CHIPS did. The board didn't have, there was no board resolution. They wanted natural light. They didn't even know what high performance was because it didn't really exist. And they got $250,000. That's part of the reason that CHIPS said $250,000. It was incremental, by the way. You got a portion when you did the design, and it went on. And what I saw from an architect's standpoint, by the way, we were the ones that secured the grant as architects and brought it to the district. They didn't even know it existed. And they said, oh, this sounds great. And there was a champion. And it changed the culture. It was the incentive. It was just enough in 2003 to change what everyone wanted to do. Every time a problem came up for 3 years, we'd tell a contractor, you can't do that substitution. I'll lose the grant. You know, it turned out that the grant, they probably spent more than what the grant was, but it didn't matter. Psychologically, the purpose of this program was to provide an incentive, and the $250,000 acted as an incentive, and it changed the culture. And now they started doing commissioning, and then it was so impressive on commissioning for this district, Tahoe Truckee, that they mandated that every project then be commissioned. I mean, what better incentive worked perfectly for them. So that's my anecdotal evidence. Lisa, you asked about, is there any way to quantify costs, you know, for what's happening? And I took a stab at it. It's not easy. It's exactly like Dennis said. Design is a holistic, difficult process. It's impossible to take points and try to establish numbers to them. But I took, and again, anecdotal evidence. We have 2 CHIPS projects that are happening in the office right now. One of them is about at a $2 million construction level. The other one's about $25 million. It's quite large. It's a replacement in kind, like Bill's projects. Here's some numbers. This is kind of a compilation of several projects. If you took about a $4 million project, that's a little bit bigger than my $2 million that is going to bid at 1:30 today, by the way. $25,000 for commissioning. When I get cost as an architect, I say, well, what's the basic package unit for HVAC? What's a water source heat pump, ground source heat pump, displacement ventilation? We get a whole list of all these kinds of things, and we have to say, is it in the budget or isn't it? I put down $125,000. That's only because sometimes it's $75,000 and sometimes it's $180,000, but it's in that kind of ballpark. Those are the kind of numbers we get. The building envelope, it's modernization. It doesn't have insulation in the walls. The building's 45 years old. Well, that means I have to tear off the wall. That's not part of the program. I have to pull down the existing ceiling. I just put in $15,000 for insulation. Acoustics, it's the most difficult thing that we have. When our acoustic engineer comes in, we've got to double up walls, which we're doing on the project. We have to put sound mitigation measures in the HVAC. It's a modernization project, so we can't locate the HVAC somewhere else because it's not new. We're stuck with the existing building. We can't change where the windows and the orientation of the building. It's different than new construction. I mean, we're in new ground trying to make it high performance, and it's why the cost is there. I put in $40,000, and those are based on cost. Sometimes we have sound doors, sound windows, 2 layers of chipboard, and so on. Controls. One of the most important things is that you have to be able to control the classroom. You have to be able to have shading. If you want to have daylight and you don't have shading, it's not going to work. Every school that any architect goes in that's old, the blinds are closed and the lights are on. And they're closed and they're on in high-performance schools that don't have controls that work because they made them too complicated. That's what the 2009 studies show. If you don't holistically deal with it and have integrated meetings, they don't work. They predicted to be, one of the studies says they're predicted to be 31% savings in energy. but they only come out 19%. Why? Controls, nobody knows how to operate them. So CHIPS is going to, in their new, our next wave, we're going to start looking at those, I believe, as mandates because they're so important. All the studies are saying this is the next wave in the green movement. And windows, upgrading windows, low E. They're not always dual pane glass. Shades, how do you shade it? Echo shades. You can't put mini blinds in a high school. They only last about 3 or 4 hours. So you have to figure out a way. By the way, Alder Creek, we faced that, and we put the blinds in between the glass so that they, because of maintenance, that was one of the main reasons. But that's an expensive solution. Community college, you can go with mini blinds. Maybe.
How much did controls cost?
Controls at, I put 25,000. Again, these are kind of wags based on numbers. I mean, I was going to go back to the office if I had more time and actually talk to the project managers. But it's, it's a reasonable guess. And the windows, I had 30,000, and that could go way up high. In the $2 million project that I'm doing right now, the mechanical engineer came back that they weren't going to change the windows. It wasn't even part of the program. The mechanical engineer came back and said, I've got to have 8-ton units in this little building. 8 tons, because it's facing the wrong way. And we said, that's crazy. You put those in this building, it only needs 5 tons. That's what would be typical in a building. It's like taking 5 3-ton units, sticking them out in the courtyard, turning them on and walking away for 15 years. I mean, it's crazy. So we said, well, let's upgrade, let's tear out all the windows in the project. I know it's not in your budget. And it almost paid for 2/3 of the downgrade in size. And what I mean is by putting in high-efficiency windows, we could put in 5-ton units instead of 8-ton units. And so it reduced the cost of the units, but the windows came up. And we all, the architects know that we do these kind of balances all the time. But there is a cost to that. It wasn't. If they had said, no, you got to put in the 12-ton units, we can't afford the extra $30,000, that's crazy. Anyway, if you add it all up, miraculously, it comes out to $250,000. For acoustical, I put in 40,000, and that was.
I got 260.
Oh, I got 260 as well.
I'm an attorney, so you got to check my math, but.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 kinds of architects: those that can count and those that can't.
Department of Finance agreed to 260. I heard him say that.
Yeah. So, I had a little bonus in there just to make sure. So it was sound insulating walls to stop the sound transmission from outside noise and the sound mitigating measures on HVAC. And those prices were fairly real. We actually had sound doors as well that the acoustic engineer recommended, but I didn't add those in. That would have raised it higher.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's very, very helpful. First one that actually followed through on something I asked. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Anna?
I'm Anna Ferrer with the County School Facilities Consortium, and I would only say that, our members, I think the question that was posed about financial hardship and whether there's been a project under financial hardship, I think we would have a hard time finding one, and maybe one. But I just want to reiterate the issues raised with financial hardship. We appreciate the work that's being done that would incentivize high-performing schools, because our members would be very interested in building and are in areas where it is much needed, very depressed areas, and also Central Valley, where the air quality and environmental conditions are particularly bad. So the equity issues that Bill Savage also raised are important, and we would just encourage you to make sure that we are eligible to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayvon?
Hi, thank you. Mayvon Garrity with Senator Lowenthal's office. I just had a few things. First of all, I wanted to let you know that Senator Steinberg, Senator Lowenthal, Senator Hancock, and Senator Pavley are very interested in this issue. They want this money to get out on the streets as quickly as possible. And it's been our understanding that we could get regs to the board that are ready to be approved by the board in April. So that's a pretty big charge, and that means actually having them written out as, in the format that OPSC has presented here, regs that the board could comfortably approve. And so I hope that you will give them at least a couple of options. It sounds like you have a couple of options in front of you right now, but I would ask that OPSC staff ensure that whatever this committee decides as potential options be in reg form for the April meeting. A couple of other things that I see that the board would need direction on, and I hope you would include this in whatever sets of regs, that someone brought up the financial hardship and allowing them to get early money for design out of the high performance pot. I think that's a good idea. I think it sounds like that needs to happen. So if you could ensure that's part of whatever regs come forward. And in general, the financial hardship issues sound like they need to be really figured out. I also want to let you know, another thought, so we can get money on the street for this, if we could have included in the proposals for the board something along the lines of contracts signed on or after the board date of approval, so that districts who have their money and are going forward and getting reimbursed by the state later can be assured that they could go forward with high performance projects now and use their own money and get that reimbursement later. I do want to let you know, Madam Chair, you mentioned about Senator Lowenthal and Senator Pavley's bill, SB 1193, that bill is going to have an urgency clause put in it next week. Okay. And the bill does contain some language that shortens the OAL timeframe. So if for any reason this process isn't successful in getting regs moving quickly, the intent of that bill is to make it happen very quickly, so that there's a leadership in the Senate really wants this money on the street.
Could you
We see it as
summarize
a
what's in the
win-win.
bill?
Pardon?
Could you summarize what's in the bill for?
Sure.
those of us not in the know?
It's very similar to the CHIPS cash proposal. However, it narrows it, so it's only focused on modernization. There was in looking at who's come in for projects, there haven't been modernization projects to date that have been apportioned to the best of my knowledge. I even understand that some that were coming down the pike have withdrawn because they couldn't make the acoustical performance levels with the funding. So we are focused on modernization for that reason. It gives the 250 base grant amount. There is no match required for the district. That doesn't mean that districts won't have to contribute funding, but it isn't required. Then it's much more general as far as the board's authority for additional funding above and beyond the $250K. It would be that the board should develop regulations that allows for additional funding for projects that exceed the minimum criteria. It does allow for CHIPS verified status, LEED certification, I believe it is, and the DSA proposal. And we would envision, to address any concerns about DSA approval, it would be just as, well, maybe not just as, but as OPSC confirms when they receive applications from school districts that it has the appropriate DSA certifications, the appropriate CDE certification, they would also be checking that it has the appropriate CHIPS and LEED certification, CHIPS or LEED certifications. I think that's generally what the bill does. And yeah, just And then just a thought from what I've heard here today, just kind of to help with framing. I could envision that it's possible to combine OPSC's proposal of shifting points for different criteria, focusing more on renewable, with the cash and chips proposal, and just, if they did it that way, doubling the points for funding purposes, but the points would be the same. So those are just thoughts, but we're really anxious to get this to the April board meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. Susan?
Susan Stewart, Stewart and Associates. I would just like to reiterate how difficult it is for modernization projects to meet the acoustical standards. These are existing schools, and oftentimes with ambient noise, if you're next to a freeway or next to a BART station, those schools, it would be next to impossible to meet the 45 decibel and get that noise level down. If you did have the kind of mitigation necessary to get to the 45 decibel, you would have such expensive mitigations, and the building would be so tight that you would then have some airflow problems, and you would have some air quality problems. So perhaps we could consider, at least for modernization, that maybe we, instead of having as a prerequisite the sound decibel issue or the acoustical issue, that perhaps it would just be an issue where the points could be an incentive, and that would get more money out for modernization. Many schools can meet all the other energy requirements, but they just can't get to that acoustical, 45 decibel acoustical, because of where the school's situated, and you can't change that in a modernization. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph.
Good morning. Joe Quinones from Montebello Unified School District. And I just want to add a couple of items to the discussion. We built a high-performance project that was a overcrowd relief grant program project, portable replacement, and I believe the funding that we got from the program was about a couple $100,000, and the cost to implement the items in the high-performance items were about $300,000. So paid for a good portion of it, but not all of it. But the district does have the intent to always maximize fiscal resources now and in the future. So we went forward with the with all the items. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, or add, is that we're also building in construction on a new career tech high school that has 5 academies, and we're going to get a grant from the state, or 5 grants from the state for that project. And however, there's no, and it's going to be a high-performance school, but there's no additional grants with career tech. And that might be something that might be considered to be added that would help in those projects. So I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other further public comment? Hello.
Hello, Michelle Healy with Marysville School District, and we have submitted quite a few projects to Lydia and DSA under the HPI program. We've done both modernization and new construction, and we are definitely in support of the additional $250,000 grant. The majority of our projects that we've submitted have been either modernizations, which are very small projects, or additional gyms, multi-purposes, and libraries. So when we're going to OPSC for funding on those, you don't get full classrooms amount of pupil grants. They're inadequate facility grants, and so those grants are reduced. And since this HPI grant is based on the amount of grants you get, and it's a percentage increase, we really get dinged on the amount of money we get just because of the type of facilities we're building. And they are more expensive. We're spending $5 million on a brand new middle school gym, and we're only getting maybe $2 million, maybe, from OPSC. So it definitely does not pan out for us. But in our facilities department, we've made the commitment to go HPI, and so we are doing that. we were able to get the acoustics on our mods, which we were very pleased with, but we also gut the building. So we take it down to studs. Everything is new HVAC, new finishes, new insulation, new everything. And I do agree that if you're not gutting the building on modernization, you're not going to be able to get any of those points. And that is very costly. And unfortunately, that was a project that we've moved forward with, and then we realized that we didn't have any modernization eligibility at that school. And so we spent our bond money on that project, and it turned out great, but we certainly would have liked to get some money for that. And I wanted to make a comment on the small projects that somebody was worried that a small project that may be a $210,000 project may get an HPI grant for the $250,000, and that your HPI grant would be more than your actual cost of the project. That would never happen. That you couldn't do HPI for $210,000. So you would I can't imagine a situation where you would have an HPI grant that would be more than the cost of the project, or even more than the OPSC's share, which is always less than half the project. So, and one other note I wanted to make was that because the grants are tied to your percentage, the grants are tied to what you're doing on modernization projects. We just did one that was just about $1 million, and we got $6,000 out of the HPI program. We got 25 from Savings by Design through PG&E, and we didn't have to do anything for that. That was basically free money. So I would hope that that extra $250 would help incredibly, as would OPSC and CASH's portion of just increasing the amount. OPSC's idea of increasing the points would certainly help some of the smaller districts that are dedicated to do this but can't use all of their money to do it. So.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yeah.
Does anyone know, and I probably should know this, but I don't, so the minimum acoustical performance, so how is that defined? And is that just is that a policy? Is it in statute? And then so too, the prerequisite status of that, is that?
It's in the CHIPS criteria.
It's a reverberation calculation. You probably can do this better at 45.
Yeah, there are two things. First of all, it's 45 decibels,
Right.
and then there's a reverb of 0.6, and then there's, based on larger spaces, there's variations on that. It's a prerequisite in the CHIPS criteria. It's currently a requirement in the OPSC regulations. So, from an HPI perspective, if you wanted to change it, it would require a change in that regulation to not require it as a prerequisite. From a CHIPS perspective, that would require a change. It's currently a prerequisite in the CHIPS criteria, and that would require sort of a semi-regulatory public review that CHIPS currently goes through as well. But clearly, CHIPS is interested in making modernization projects work, and if there's any tweaks that would be required for modernization projects to make it work in California and other states, we would be open to considering that as well.
And I know there's probably arguments against this, and you might be able to present one, but the problem with acoustical, there's no payback to the district per se. So
well, the payback is in terms of learning, and I think that's
right. But so much of what we're doing, in this program is it's the right thing for the environment, and oh, by the way, it saves the general fund, and there's a payback period. Acoustical, it's there, it's a prerequisite.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that we can tell our public that, other than, God forbid, the students' learning environment's better, right?
I would love to see the study that says acoustical increases test scores.
Yeah, we're waiting for it.
So I appreciate the information.
Yeah, Dennis, then Bill, then Lisa, are you? Okay, Dennis and Bill?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, on the high-performance program, the acoustical is not mandatory. It's only mandatory if you include work in that system. Now, with acoustical, I'm not sure how that would be defined. Anything that you would do with the envelope would trigger that, right?
Right. The way that modernizations works is that in the scope of the work, if you are touching that portion, then you would have to do that prerequisite. If you're not, then you just would not be part of that category.
For acoustical, what kind of work would trigger the acoustical requirement? Anything having to do with the envelope or?
HVAC?
HVAC.
Well, yeah, but
How about
it's-
the envelope?
Yeah, that's one of, okay. Okay, but it's not absolutely necessary, but
So-
it
And
sounds like.
I'm
it would
actually,
be-
I know the modernization's a big piece, but I'm also speaking to new construction as well. It's
So,
not-
acoustical is a really good example of a very high cost upfront for districts because all of our modernization projects now, we pay for an acoustical engineer to be part of the design team, and that was never the case in the past. Every project, so it's either an ad service and an additional consultant on the architect's team, or we often hire the acoustical engineer ourselves, the district directly. And the impacts of the acoustical engineer's participation in meeting these points extends to the mechanical systems and the locations of the systems and the duct lining that has to go into them and the elbows and all of the costs there. And all of our new classrooms now have ended up with acoustical treatments inside the classrooms above the whiteboards and tackboard areas, these sound baffles and that kind of stuff, and absorbent areas. And so there's real clear additional costs related to meeting that requirement.
Chris?
If I may comment on Mr. Sandwich's project, I saw, $260,000 worth of increased costs. 60% of that would come out to $156,000 for the state share. If we looked at say a 4% level on your $4 million grant, that would mean the state is providing $160,000 on what would be $156,000 of state share. Just a comment.
Okay, as we're getting close to the time to break, I want to put a couple things in perspective as we come back this afternoon for implementation committee to think about working on as you're eating your lunch. This is reality. This proposal, as written by OPSC, is coming to the board. So, understanding that this is the base, this is option one. So I want to come back and have discussions, okay, this is the base. What is the implementation committee, suggestions that may form option two that are presented to the board or is a potential merger that we need to think about. But know that this, as it's written, that's why I started to ask about the regulations. Anybody having problems with the language, whatnot, that's what I need to know and get confirmation, because this proposal is coming to the State Allocation Board. So then let's start from this kind of as a base and look at other suggestions and problems that have come up. Now, it's not confirmed that it is coming in April. We are working with the chair, and I believe if board members definitely want it to, they should make sure that they get a hold of the Department of Finance and talk to our chair, Cynthia Bryant, who develops the agenda with OPSC. So I would like to see it on the April agenda. I'm sure several board members would as well, but it is at the discretion of the chair and the executive officer, Lisa Silverman. So want to think about those as we go to lunch. Think about things that we potentially maybe need to address, financial hardship. Maybe the 250 base is not where we start off with. Maybe there's a mixture of that. So let's keep all options open as we break a little early, so we'll actually go from noon to 1. And see you back here at 1 o'clock.